It provides a cultural opportunity for students as well as the community to explore the rich heritage of St. Bernard and the New Orleans area.
Dr. Warner has given me the honor of introducing the guest tonight, who is a man that I think everyone is familiar with, who's very busy this time of year and has been really gracious to take part of his busy schedule that starts and gets pretty crazy in the next few days to come join us for this series. And his name is Mr. Arthur Hardy, so please help me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you very much. I'm breaking one of the prime tenets of showbiz. Never follow a pet or a child on stage. But I'm happy to be here. Just a couple of things. This will not be a lecture, believe me. This will be a conversation. I'm one of the most disoriented, scatterbrained, unorganized persons you'll ever see, so I'm going to be all over the place. But we'll try to make it fun and cover some things you might like to know about. One of the wonderful things about being a so-called expert is that you can make stuff up and people believe it, you know. I didn't know that. Yeah, it must be true. I've been involved in the Mardi Gras business on a professional level for 31 years during the Mardi Gras Guide, and I've been in television since 1986. And I really love it. You know, I kid people and say it beats working for a living, but it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. I think Mardi Gras is one of the things this area does so very, very well. And of course, when I say this area, I mean the metro area. I don't have to tell you how hard this parish was hit by the storm, and everybody was hit, but not as hard as you were. I had family that lost 2 homes down here. I have been only an observer to Mardi Gras down here, but back in the 70s, I was a high school band director. I used to judge the Shangri-La Parade. And I did a little research before I left the house, and see how many of you remember these parades that all paraded in Chalmette, Araby, St. Bernard. Araby, which was the original Araby, then they came back for a couple of years. Amor, remember then? That was a crew of about 800 people. It was a mega crew. Aphrodite, Aquarius, Atreus, Carnival, Shalimar, Daughters of Eve, Hadaris, Juno, Jupiter, who were captained by a husband and wife team, and they merged and had the Juno-Jupiter crew. Children's parades like Sprites, Oz, and Pan, Titans, Samson and Delilah, and Vikings, which had some tremendous celebrities. Peter Graves, I'm trying to remember, Leif Erikson, and they had one of the, McLean Stevenson, the fellow in MASH, was king of a St. Bernard parade. And Mardi Gras really peaked in the parish, I guess in the late 70s, early 80s. And then we wound up with just 2 or 3 parades. I'm so grateful that we have at least one this year, the crew of Nemesis that came back, that had wanted to parade 2 years ago, didn't, but made it a point to get in the street after Katrina. And they're coming back. And Bobby Hebert is going to be their Grand Marshal. And there's an interesting connection there. Gladiators, which paraded for years, always had sports figures as their king. And I want to read you some names, see how many of these guys you remember. Starting back in 1974, George Blanda, Ken Stabler, Burt Jones, I'm just reading NFL players, Joe Ferguson, Norris Weiss, who played in the Super Bowl, Billy Kilmer, Archie Manning, Martin Anderson, on and on and on. So while a lot of people in New Orleans think about Chalmette and St. Bernard is over there, it was very much mainstream Mardi Gras. And I think part of that was because of how family-oriented it was, and it was different here. And when I used to bring my high school bands to march here, it was always a pleasant experience. You didn't get hassled by anybody. It had a unique flavor to it here. I want to tell you about some of the things I get to experience in this job. Television is a blast. I really enjoy it, particularly the things that we tape. The live stuff is always scary because for a couple of reasons. One, I'm always afraid I'm going to utter some four-letter word and lose my career, which has happened to people, by the way. And others is that something strange will happen during the middle of a live shot, and it has to me and others. Well, somebody will hit you in the head with a pack of beads, and you're supposed to just keep on going like nothing ever happened. And you've got somebody talking to you in your ear while you're trying to act relaxed and like you know everything. And normally they'll tell you, you've got like 10 seconds to wrap it up, and you're trying to be, now, so here we are now back to, and right when you're about to say, now back to you in the newsroom, they'll say, stretch 10 more seconds. So you look like an idiot because you've just said goodbye and then you have to say hello again. And I'm never very comfortable doing that, but one thing that happened because of television, I've had the chance to be on the Today Show 4 times, is I get to speak at a lot of conventions. And that's fun. First of all, you can tell them anything and they believe you. But trying to share Mardi Gras with people, it's hard. It's very hard to explain this festival to anybody. I mean, it really doesn't make any sense. And it makes terrible television. I mean, to see a Mardi Gras parade on TV is just not that exciting because it's a crowd participation event. You have to get into it. I always explain to people about the king cake tradition, and you know what that whole deal is. And one time I had a guy raise his hand and he said, you people are crazy here. I said, well, we'll accept that, but how so? He said, it sounds like a headline from a National Enquirer newspaper. I said, excuse me? He says, yeah, you can't see the paper? Man finds baby inside cake, declares himself king and throws a party, But I mean, we do that and we think nothing of it. There's so many inside things to Mardi Gras that we all take for granted. 1990, Christmas of '91, when Dorothy Mae Taylor, African-American councilwoman for the city of New Orleans, was upset that some private clubs were all white and they were using public streets, and therefore introduced an ordinance that said this wasn't legal, that they had to integrate or move off the street. Eventually, that went to the Supreme Court, and it was ruled in favor of the private clubs, that even though they may discriminate, they had the right to parade and assemble. Anyhow, that was the first time I'd ever been called by New York Times to do an interview, and I was pretty jazzed about it. And I told my secretary, hold all calls, and I always wanted to say that, hold all calls. This is the big one. So I'm on the phone talking to this guy, and she comes running in saying, you have to take this call. You got to take this call. I'm saying, nah, it's New York Times. We'll be in a newspaper. Well, anyway, she convinced me it was an emergency. So I asked the reporter, I said, look, man, can you hang on 1 second? I've got something. I'll be right back. So it was an important call. It was from a captain of a parading club that was telling me they were not going to parade, and I needed to get that on the 6 o'clock news. So I hurry up with that. I get back, and the guy, I said, I'm sorry, I'm back. The guy says, family emergency? Somebody get hurt? I said, no, I was just talking to this lady from Venus. Yeah, and of course we know it's a parade, but after this long pause, he says, you're talking to people from outer space, No, not exactly. But there are just so many things like that we kind of take for granted, that we know as part of our culture. And I can get into the history and all that in the Q&A section, but just as things come to me here, I did a talk before some downtown development district people a few years ago, and they were grilling me on how big is Mardi Gras. Well, this is pre-Katrina. 60 parades in 4 parishes. It's like 1,200 floats, 600 bands. They're on the streets a total of 300 hours, 200 miles. I add it all up. And it generates $1 billion, according to the University of New Orleans Economic Impact Study. $1 billion, like 4 Super Bowls. guy's eyes light up, you know, and a fella, I think he was from Detroit, says, "Could I have Mardi Gras in Detroit?" I wanted to say, "I'll sell you the rights for $1 million." I said, "No," I said, "Sure." I said, it's okay with me. But I said, remember now, Mardi Gras, the day, and we all know Mardi Gras is French for Fat Tuesday, can be as early as February 3rd, or as late as March 9th. But it's probably cold in Detroit at that time of year. He says, well, yeah, but $1 billion, man, you know, we'll just dress warm. What else I got to do? I said, well, on that day, the post office closes, the government closes, banks, city, you know, everything shuts down. Now he's starting to back up a little bit, and he keeps coming back to that $1 billion. So then we're going to have about 100 floats on whatever Main Street Detroit is, Ford Avenue or something, and you can have probably 1 million people on either side of those floats, and half of them will be loaded, and then we're going to give out free gifts. And he says, ain't no way. So we would have a riot in our city. And in truth, in most cities where this isn't genetically encoded into your DNA, think about what we do. This is the only city in the world that has parades at night. Think about the security nightmare that is. We've been doing it so long, we think absolutely nothing of it. You know, and our police departments here are so good that police departments from around the world come to see how we handle crowds. The fact that it brings so much money and is funded by the individuals and not the government. The city, the last survey we had, and I'm talking New Orleans, spent $5 million in police and sanitation and EMS services, got back $21.5 million in direct tax revenues, 4-to-1 return. Now, what city wouldn't take that bet? Everybody's used to something being sponsored. You know, the Buick Open, the Fiesta Rose, but whatever. But this event, the shareholders of this corporation are the citizens. And I likened it to if you went to New York and you're standing in line at a Broadway theater and you're about to buy your ticket, and the actors and actresses come off the stage, dig in their pockets and say, come in, I'm going to buy your ticket. The show's on us. And by the way, before you leave, we're going to have free gifts for you to take home. And that really is what Mardi Gras is. Name another entertainment venue in the world where the people who put it on pay for it, and you don't pay jack. You just sit there and enjoy it. You don't need a ticket. You don't have to pass a test. There's no dress code. I almost wish there were in French Quarter. But it's an amazing phenomenon. And I was once challenged in a friendly way as I explained this whole, I tried to, how we do things. And I says, wait, I got to get this right because they ain't going to believe this back home. He said, okay, if I work real hard, I might get invited to belong to a crew, which you all spell K-R-E-W-E because you don't know how to spell. And if I get in, I might have to pay $1,000 dues. I said, yeah, that's right. He said, then I'm obligated to buy maybe $1,000 worth of junk, which you all call throws. I said, right. Then you dress me up in a costume and a mask so nobody knows who I am. I said, right. And I got to give all the stuff away to strangers? I said, yeah, you got it. He says, you all are out of your mind. He said, they won't believe this back home. Why do we do this? You know, and the only answer I've ever been able to come up with is that we like spreading joy. You know, it's a lot of work and a lot of money to put on a parade. But it's not just about having fun. And that was never more evident than after Katrina, when so many of the organizations stepped up to the plate and did charitable, philanthropic events. Just to name a few, the Ladies Crew of Muses gave $50,000 to the NOPD. Bacchus raised about $250,000 for Children's Hospital. And the Rex organization started something called Pro Bono Publico for the public good, a foundation to help charter schools. I'm a graduate of Warren Easton High School in New Orleans, which took on 8 feet of water. And the school board wasn't wise enough to even open the doors and let the water out, and decided that they weren't going to reopen it. I got together with 9 of my buddies, and we petitioned the school board to let us run it, and we took it over as a charter by a 4-to-3 vote. And we need money. The Rex organization hooked us up with Sandra Bullock, who was looking to find a worthy charity in New Orleans that would somehow touch kids, and she picked us. And I'm not allowed to tell you how much money it was. It's in the six figures, but it's substantial, and she's trying to hook up some other actors and actresses to help us. And I mention that only because here's a Mardi Gras crew, which has absolutely nothing to do with charter schools, with this outreach program to try to help. So a lot of these crews give back a lot to the community. That's not their purpose, though. Their purpose is to have fun and spread fun, and Lord knows they do that well. The biggest problem Mardi Gras is facing right now, other than the general problem of the city of crime, and is the city back enough on its feet for visitors to come? I'm just talking about as an image around the country. Is the girls gone wild foolishness that happens on Bourbon Street. That has become the national image of Mardi Gras. And it's really a shame, because Mardi Gras, for the most part, is for families and kids, and it's a time when we can be kids again. But that's not what makes the headlines. The city tried this year to sell 4 corporate sponsorships to Mardi Gras at $1 million a pop. And I did some free consulting with a company that they hired to do this. Or it didn't happen. The company lost a lot of money because they were working on a commission-only basis. And the reasons cited most often by the corporations, and they talked to like 2,000 really big companies. Number one reason, I don't want my brand associated with nudity. And they really thought that if you know, whatever the brand is, Ford Motor Company doesn't want people thinking they're endorsing bare breasts on Bourbon Street. And no matter how hard they tried, and the other thing was crime in New Orleans, no matter how hard this company tried to convince them, that ain't it. Come see what it really is. They couldn't get over that hump. So something has to be done, not only to change the perception, but the reality. Because I don't know how many of you have been in the French Quarter, forgetting 06. 06 was entirely different, but prior to that, it's really gotten nasty down there, folks. It's not, it used to be, you know, kind of naughty and ooh, man, within the last 10 years, it's gotten just downright gross and disgusting. And it has nothing to do with Mardi Gras. There have been no Mardi Gras parades in the French Quarter since 1973. But people think Rex goes down Bourbon Street. Now, they have these little preseason parades that go down there, but I'm talking about a Mardi Gras parade. It doesn't happen. So people really think, if I'm going to bring my 8-year-old daughter to Mardi Gras, she's going to see naked people doing things. No, she's not. But, you know, how do you get that message out? So I'm hoping the city does something to address some of that. I don't ever like to read from notes, but I want to read you a couple of these things before we open it up for questions. I know all of you all get these emails like, you know you're a Cajun when, you know you're a redneck when. Well, this is, and I'm sure you've heard most of these. You know you're from New Orleans when. You're happy when Christmas holidays are over because soon it will be carnival time. You understand that K and B purple is different from Mardi Gras purple. And it is. You can tell this is an old one. You use a Schwegman bag as a unit of measurement. As in, I came home from the Bacchus parade with 3 Schwegman bags full of beads. You think finding a foreign object in your cake is a good thing. You understand that in Mardi Gras, a captain outranks a king. You believe it is perfectly normal for shiny beads to be growing from the branches of oak trees along St. Charles Avenue. You feel like purple, green, and gold look good together, and you even eat things in those colors. Every time you hear a siren, you look for a Mardi Gras parade. You have a parade ladder in your shed. You didn't find out until high school that Mardi Gras is not a national holiday. You like long hair music, Professor Longhair's music. You traded your summer condo in Colorado for a home along a parade route. When you go to buy a new winter coat, you throw your arms up in the air to make sure it allows enough room to catch bees. You are pleased that your finest china has Endymion stamped on it. You call a single strand of beads a pair and proudly hang them from your car's rearview mirror. You understand why more size 14 pumps are sold in New Orleans at carnival time than anywhere else on the planet. Your baby's first words were, long beads. These statements make perfect sense to you. My hairdresser Bruce, bragged he will reign as queen of a carnival ball. Float 17, upper deck, neutral ground side. Where else would you know? Throw the baby out the window, it's carnival time, from the famous song. And this one I love. I caught these panties off a lady from Iris. Yeah, they're not mine, but anyhow. I've got more things here we can talk about, but let's do a few questions here to save what's left of my voice. I caught some sort of grunge here, and I'm hanging on here. But let's have some questions. Yes, ma'am, front row.
There's a mic here.
In the last couple of years,
Wait, we got a mic coming to you. Hey.
in, say, the last few years, a couple before Katrina and then last year, what's been the strangest new throw that a club has introduced to Mardi Gras?
Strangest new throw, I would have to say, are these lighted beads, blinking beads that also talk, that will say, Hail Bacchus, or in one case, it were 4 crews that, and Bacchus was one of them, that actually had like a 30-second song that played. Amazing. The thing about throws, we've become so jaded, we're throwing stuff back at people in the floats, which is dangerous, or leaving it in the ground. It's not enough, I'm giving you a free meal, you want steak. I mean, my goodness, it's a shame, and it's very competitive, but throws have really gotten very expensive. And the heavier they are, the more dangerous they are. But that's a good question. More questions. Come on, stump the so-called expert. We're coming to you.
I can remember as a child, they had 2 gangs that used to kind of roam the French Quarter. One they called the Bones, and another they were dressed like gorillas. Why did they disappear?
I don't know. I've seen pictures of those groups, but I don't know. And that's the neat thing about costume. Families will get together, or a neighborhood group or something. And it's also the fun of the secrecy of the mask. You don't know who's behind those things. But I have seen pictures of those. And another new tradition that is in danger of dying after Katrina is the Mardi Gras Indians. Those guys, many of which lived in the 9th Ward in Gentilly, New Orleans East, took terrible hits. And they didn't have money to start out with. So I hope we don't lose them either. Got one.
I have a question. Yeah, about the glass beads. I know they're not made in Czechoslovakia anymore.
Right.
That certainly was a good way to learn how to spell that country's name.
I never learned.
What do you think about the new glass beads, and how expensive are they to throw?
I don't know how expensive they are, but I think they're really neat. I've got some, and it's not the same, but it's pretty nice. And it's interesting that we're going back to our roots in some of these things. I don't know how many of you are active on eBay. I spend more time on eBay than I should, and more money than I have. But eBay has both helped Mardi Gras collectors and hurt them, in that, like these beads, I know people were paying $15 a pair a while back to get them, and then somebody flooded the eBay market with them, and now they're down to, I don't know, a couple of dollars a pair. There's a lot more out there than in people's attics. Speaking of people's attics, Greg O'Brien, former chancellor at UNO, tells this wonderful story about when he moved to New Orleans from wherever he was from, that he was advised not to buy a house near the lakefront because of soil subsidence, houses would sink, and you'd have to pay to raise them up. And so he said he commissioned a little study and found out it had nothing to do with the water table. It was all the beads in people's attics that, I don't think that's true, but it's kind of a fun story. Okay, where are we?
Here we are. What about the demise of the flambeau carriers?
Well, it's an interesting tradition, the flambeau carrier. There was a lot of pressure in the African American community to do away with them, and their point was that it was undignified. They didn't talk to the flambeau carriers, who didn't think so at all. They looked at themselves as paid performers and made a lot of money and enjoyed it. And it is, I'd say, as late as the early 90s, there would be 400 flambeau carrier wannabes who would show up to carry about 40 flambeau. It's not that way anymore, and it's even 5 years before Katrina, fewer and fewer people had any interest in carrying the flambeau, and you're not going to make anybody do it. So now you're seeing white flambeau carriers. I saw a woman carry a flambeau last year, which to me just changes the whole character of it. But the flambeaus themselves, the units still exist. There's several crews that have them. The original ones are in a den shared by Comus, Momus, and Proteus. Those are the oldest ones. And incidentally, the Comus Parade, the entire 1992 parade that didn't roll, is still in the den under wraps. Now, I think if they wanted to get that parade in the street, they'd have to do a lot of reworking those wheels and make sure that, they hadn't become so rickety that fall apart. But that parade is still there, and I hope one day they'll get back on the street. They were the first parade in 1857, and they always were the last parade on Mardi Gras night. And to me, Mardi Gras doesn't have an end anymore. It's just like after the last truck passes, that's it. Where Comus was the period at the end of the day. And that was always a really an emotional parade for me, because it was the end of a long season for me, and but it was kind of bittersweet, And then I start counting the days till next year. Yes?
Mr. Hardy, we have a lot of people here who are from out of town.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And they don't understand maybe what a flambeau carrier is. Could you explain the origin of that?
Yeah, and I'm not here to sell books, but I think we have pictures of them in our Mardi Gras guide. But basically it's a lighted torch. It has kerosene burners on the top in sort of, I don't know if you'd call them bowls or dishes, and the fuel drops down, and it's lighted, and it's beautiful. And of course, why did we do this? Because back in 1857, we didn't have electricity. So the only way to light a parade was with these torches. And then they were kept on for ornamental reasons. But if you can get downtown, the absolute best parade to see them in is the Proteus Parade. This is Mardi Gras Eve, Monday, the 19th of February, and they start at 5:30. And to see those old units around these wonderful floats that date back to the 1800s, going down St. Charles Avenue with the oak trees, and these floats shimmer because they have wooden wheels. I mean, it's a throwback parade. To me, that's probably the best night in Carnival, because they're followed by the Orpheus Parade, which is just a wonderful new super crew. It has celebrities, beautiful floats, beautiful themes. So in that one evening, you'll see something from 1882 and from this decade, this millennium, I guess. One quick thing before I answer another question about celebrities in Mardi Gras. I think it was a great thing. Well, the first real celebrity was Louis Armstrong, who came back to rule over Zulu in 1949. But the Bacchus organization in 1969 had Danny Kaye as their first king. And that was, to many people in New Orleans, it was just a horrible thing. It would have an out-of-towner as a king of the parade. But the Bacchus founders said, you know what, Mardi Gras needs a shot in the arm. We have empty hotel rooms, let's jazz it up. So they did. I think the best Bacchus ever, and this year it's James Gandolfini, which I'm going to have a chance to interview, I'm proud to say. Bob Hope, I think, was the absolute best. He was Bacchus in '74, which was 3 years before I started my magazine. But I got to meet him because I was judging the Bacchus band contest that year. And I met him for about a minute. But what everybody told me about Bob was that he was nice to everybody. Now, all these celebrities are nice to the mayor and the governor, in some cases to me, because we're all in a position to do something for them or to knock them publicly. But I kind of like to judge people by, how do they treat the waiter at Antoine's? And there have been some that treated the waiters at Antoine's like dirt, but not Bob. I mean, everybody just loved up on him. Well, the story goes that he almost didn't get to ride because he had prostate surgery 2 weeks before the parade. And for those of you that don't know, the king or the monarch wears tights, very close-fitting clothes, and there's no bathroom on the king's float in most cases. They have them on the other floats. It might be a 5-gallon drum, but there's something on a float. So supposedly, he really had to go to the bathroom bad. And a couple of blocks, for those of you that know Lee Circle and St. Charles Avenue and Gallier Hall, a couple of blocks before Gallier Hall, where he was supposed to toast the mayor, he, I think, gave the tractor driver $100 or something, and they got a ladder up and let him crawl down and run into this honky-tonk dive flophouse ballroom that none of us would be seen dead in. But, when you gotta go, you gotta go. So he did. NBC filmed the parade. It was a big special. It was wonderful. For 5 years, there was a sign there that said, Bob Hope peed here. and I believe that's a true story. One of the quick celebrity story, the most fun interview I've ever done was with Whoopi Goldberg, who was about as ordinary as any of us. I mean, she hugged me, come on, baby, what you want to talk about? You know, and I was a nervous wreck. Relax, kid, you know, you'll be all right. And I got the microphone in my hand, I'm just going to go, and she said, you know, calm down. So we talked, and she said, I like you, kid, and I'm older than she is, she called me kid. She said, after the parade, you and your cameraman be by my float. When I get down, I'm going to give you an exclusive interview on how wonderful this experience was. She said, because, you know, I've done everything in the world, but I've never done this, and this is going to be special. Right, so, you know, when she got to Garrier Hall, she didn't have to use the bathroom, but instead of toasting the mayor with a glass of champagne, Whoopi had the whole bottle. And she was having a grand time. So, you know, 6 hours and 3 bottles later, get inside the convention center, and nobody can see Whoopi. She's up there someplace, or maybe lying down, I don't know. So when she got down off the float, about 4 of her handlers were around her, and they turned around and looked at me and went like, don't you dare put that camera on. So I didn't get the interview. So a year later, she comes back and is Grand Marshal again of Orpheus, which has never happened before. I got to meet her again. She pretended like she remembered me. I'm sure she didn't. I said, why did you come back? She said, to find out if I really had such a good time as they say I did. And she has actually tried to help get other celebrities to come to Mardi Gras, because she did have such a good time. And you know, these celebrities, sometimes they think people are coming just to see them. Now, you and I know everybody would be out there no matter who's on that King's Float. But I've had more than a few tell me how very unique this experience is, that you can be adored by 1 million people, but you're at a safe distance. You know, you can interact, you can wave and all, but nobody can touch you. You're not in an unsafe environment. And it really is special. And some of them are just completely blown away by this. And a couple of them have gotten wasted on the floats, but for the most part, there's only one that was a little bit obnoxious, but for the most part, they handle it well. And they seem to really enjoy themselves and kind of become ambassadors for our city. Okay, some more questions. Don't be easy on me now. Now, this man knows more about Mardi Gras than I do. Tony Amadio, who's instrumental in the development of the doubloon and is quite an expert, and I bet he's going to stump me. Come on, Tony. Right there.
Why does the date of Mardi Gras fluctuate so much?
Okay, Tony's asking a question that he knows the answer to, but I'm glad because I didn't cover this. Mardi Gras is always 47 days before Easter. Why is that? And that can be as early as February 3rd, March 9th. Next year, it's February 5th, which means the Bacchus Parade will roll during the Super Bowl in which the Saints will be playing. Yeah. But I wrote 3 letters to the Pope, and he hasn't written me back about changing the date next year, but the Pope is the reason for the date. Actually, the Catholic Church established the date of Mardi Gras. Now, the carnival season always begins on January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, the 12th night. That's the official opening of the carnival season. The church is really responsible for that season. The way I appreciate the history that I've read is that when the church was coming into power, some of their pagans, their converts, were still had some heathen ways, you know, human sacrifice, things like that. So they said, look, guys, you got to cut this foolishness out, but we will let you party on for a short period of time. That time is the carnival season. And no human sacrifices, but you can have some fun. From January 6th to Mardi Gras, which is French for Fat Tuesday. Okay, so you can party on, and then on Mardi Gras, you can really let it all hang out. Have a grand time. That's the good news. The bad news is at midnight, it becomes a season of Lent, Ash Wednesday. So Mardi Gras and carnival season is really the feasting before the fasting. Now, why they decided to tie this to this moving date is very technical. It has something to do with the pilgrims making their Easter pilgrimages and being able to travel at night by the light of the full moon. So, and I know this isn't correct, but it's something like 21 days after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, will be Easter. Back it up 47 days, and that's Mardi Gras. It's close to that. It's in the magazine. So it's a long answer to a short question, but if you don't like it, blame the Pope. No, you don't have to blame him. Yes, front row.
I heard that Mobile, Alabama celebrated Mardi Gras before New Orleans did. Is that true?
It is true, but we have to define our terms. Mardi Gras was celebrated in many places, including, well, March 3rd, 1699, Iberville was coming up the river, and where he landed that night, 60 miles south of here, he named it Point du Mardi Gras, okay? That was before Mobile. Now, they didn't have a parade, but he called it that. New Orleans was founded in 1718. Mid-1700s, there was some sort of a Mardi Gras acknowledgement here. Not parades, not floats, nothing like that, but something was going on. No parades. 1831 in Mobile, they started a series of Mardi Gras parades that we would recognize as Mardi Gras parades. But they did it on New Year's Eve. Members of that first group, which we call the Carbellians Duracan Society, and that's a long story, came to New Orleans and founded our first group, the Mystic Crew of Comus, which gave us our first parade in 1857. We used their floats. We used their costume. Anybody who says we don't owe them something is wrong. Now, they didn't have their Mardi Gras parades on Mardi Gras until 1866. So you can argue who had the first Mardi Gras parade. I say give it up. Give them their credit. We show them where to put it and how to do it, mainly on Mardi Gras and better, but you got to give them credit, and I don't mind giving them that credit. But there's no, in my mind, and I really can't say that because I can't be there and here. I'm not seeing their Mardi Gras. But I think around the world, if you say Mardi Gras, I don't think people say, oh, Mobile. We're going to run that here.
Back to the flambeau carriers.
Okay, flambeau?
Is there a tradition about throwing change to them, and what is it? Is it good?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the flambeau carriers are paid, and I don't know how much. I guess it depends. But it's customary. They don't just carry the flambeau; they dance with the flambeau. They're entertainers, and it's customary for people to throw them change. Now, people who don't understand this think of it as being very demeaning, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a tribute. It's not like dancing for your supper. It's more of thanks for entertaining me. In all of this, in Mardi Gras and everything else, you can see whatever you want to in something. You can turn something that's very positive into something very negative. But to me, Mardi Gras is one of the most diverse events in the world. There's something for everybody, but not everybody can be in everything. And that's kind of the world we live in. Now, there are some organizations that I wouldn't be invited to be in, and I wouldn't fit in, but I still appreciate the free show they give me and my family. So I don't think it should be, if I can't drive that Lexus, then neither can you. What's the point in that?
I have two questions.
Yes. Okay.
I wondered about the origin of the word crew, and the other one is that we saw a band last night of men play instrumental band, and one of the people had an umbrella, and they carried little things around, little sort of statue-like things around with them. I wondered if that's part of Mardi Gras or if that's something that's here all the time.
Where did you see this?
I hate to tell you, it was in Harrah's.
Oh, Harrah's, no. I have no idea what that was, to tell you the truth, but the first question I can answer. Crew was spelled K-R-E-W-E, came from the Mystic Crew of Comus, the first parade founded in 1857. And they chose that spelling just to give it an old English flair to it. And Comus was a mythological god, and they started really the formula for Mardi Gras. Initially, these were secret societies. The whole idea of the mask just lends to the mystique of Mardi Gras. And incidentally, it's only legal to wear a mask if you're on a float or on Fat Tuesday. And the reason for that is security. We don't want people dressed up as gorillas for 2 weeks going in the banks. Think about it. It's security-wise, it could be a nightmare. Some more questions. Don't be shy or easy.
Right back here, all the way in the back. How you doing?
Okay, yeah. We got
I have doubloons.
Okay.
4 things that come to my mind are doubloons, Rex, 1960, Alvin Sharp. Connections?
I'll tell you who can answer that question better than me. Tony Amadio, what's that 60 Rex worth?
I haven't seen the price of the book yet, but it's pretty high up. It's probably one of the most sought after.
Yeah,
It's probably one of the most sought after coins. It's because it's one of the original. But actually, the 60 Rex was not the original first doubloon thrown. It was actually a coin thrown something like a doubloon at the Carrollton Parade, which was 2 days prior to that.
Right.
And also I think the
Growler, huh?
there was another wooden nickel too before the Rex.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of people want the first, but the first order was the 60 Rex.
I would sure hang on to it. I mean, it's not going to be worth $200, but it's not anything you want to sell at a garage sale. In general, the market for doubloons has collapsed, unfortunately. They peaked in the late 80s, and it's a shame. To me, it's the perfect throw because it'll last forever. It's got the crew crest on one side, the theme of the parade, the date. In this little sliver of metal, it says, "I was at this event." But there again, we became jaded, and the clubs make money on doubloons. And I'm making up these numbers. Back when, if a doubloon cost a penny and they sold it to their members for a nickel, that money helped underwrite the parade. So some parades got greedy and said, why don't we do 25 different doubloons? And then collectors said, you know what, I'm giving this up because I can't get a complete set anymore. And then other crews said, well, I'm going to do something different. We're going to do cups. And cups are fun and they have a utilitarian value, but how many of them can you fit in your dishwasher? I mean, so now, in fact, if anything, doubloons have made a little bit of a comeback. Cups, I think, are way, way on the way out. And of course, anything with the crew name on it is pretty neat. We're doing something at Channel 6 new this year, starting Friday. We taped interviews with all 53 parade captains in the metro area that will run day of their parade, and we'll show what they're throwing. And then we're having a contest where we've got throws from all 53 parades, and one lucky viewer will win everything, as if you had gone to all those parades, which I did once before I was in television, and just about wound up in the hospital, because it's hard to make them all. But for really crazy people, this would be a good contest, and so tune in to Channel 6. I think we've got one. Are you there? And then here. Yes, ma'am.
One of my favorite memories was when I saw that gorilla pick up hold a copy and carry her off. Do new reporters to the area get some sort of training for Mardi Gras?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Do reporters get a training for Mardi Gras? Not for something like that that happened. That was a defining moment in her career. She became one of us then. I actually did I was at Channel 4 then, did a live shot with her the night before, and we hadn't even met. They just threw us together, and I called her Coda Hoppy on the air. Almost the end of my career. But speaking of nice people, she and Angela Hill too. What you see is what you get. Those are two of the most genuine, wonderful, nice, down-home, do anything for you people in the world. And I think that's why the city just fell in love with her, But that Moss man sealed the deal. When we have new reporters at Channel 6, one of my jobs is to try to school them into, some general Mardi Gras history, and they get a magazine to read and all. I'm not going to mention the station, but no, I can't. But anyway, this particular person, it was a local station. We went through everything, and she said, okay, it's flambeau. I said, no, it's not flambeau, it's flambeau. Bo. Okay, we're on, Here we are at the start of the Spartan Parade. Tell me a little bit about the flambeau. And I hear the people in the room going, no, you goofball, it's flambeau. So, I said, well, actually, that's flambeau. I explained the whole thing. She said, well, we're live here from St. Charles, Napoleon with Arthur Hardy and these beautiful flambeau carriers. Back to you, I felt so bad for her, but it does have its own lingo. I mean, imagine, the hardest thing is the weather people. They come down here and have to, you're from Indiana, and they look and say, Pibodox? I mean, this is a hard town, a hard area. And, you make that mistake one time, and forever you're branded as the weatherman who said Thibodeaux, and your credibility's shot. You might know your weather, but you can't mess with people from Thibodeau, right? Is that a question or somebody scratching it, right? Okay, yes.
I know somebody who belongs to Rex, and years ago I saw the kind of gifts that they give to friends and stuff like that. I know that Rex is the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, and do you have any idea how much they spend? Because, I mean, they got one Mardi Gras, they gave a relative or somebody special a whole heavy silver box. I mean,
Yeah.
sterling silver, so I know.
Yeah, the organization doesn't require that they do anything, and it doesn't cost anything to be Rex, in other words. But anybody who is Rex has money, is a prominent member of society, and they can spend as much as they want giving out gifts, and those are very, very collectible. Speaking of Rex, and another thing that's different about this celebration, I'm going to have the opportunity to interview him for the station. I mean, all the stations have this opportunity about a week before the parade. Now, they keep it secret till the night before. In any other town, somebody would get that scoop, and it would be Eyewitness News is happy to report. If you did that in this town, you would be dead meat. I mean, really, you would be so looked down upon by the public and the news media. There's this unwritten rule that you don't mess with Mardi Gras. And I think it's really neat. There are not many things that we have these kind of traditions. It's no big deal, but it's still kind of special. Nothing exemplifies this more than in 1951 when the Duke and Duchess of Windsor came to town, and many of you know this story, but it was at Mardi Gras, and they decided they wanted to go to the Rex and Comus balls. And at these balls, the king and queen are up on a throne, and if you're important enough, you're escorted up to the throne. And you have to bow and curtsy. And nobody was going to tell a Duke and Duchess of Windsor, you got to bow before these bozos who think they're kings. But they got up, and a hush fell upon the auditorium, and they went up, and they bowed and curtsied. And it was made a double-page spread in Life magazine that week. And it was just such a special moment because they got it. This is just fun, it's make-believe. But they understood that it's nice for a day, a week, a month, to be someplace, someone else, just to enjoy make-believe. And in this town, in theory, most anyone can be king, and we also have a lot of queens. Yes?
Can you give us some information on the history of the baby and the king cake?
Yes, I can. And this is controversial. Before the baby, we had these ceramic dolls called frozen Charlottes. Some of you people my age and older may remember those. You could chip your teeth on them. Before that, they had pecans, they had beans. Through the ages, it's been all kind of different objects in there. The baby, the plastic baby, which everybody wants to say is Jesus because it's King's Day, it's the Feast of the Epiphany and all that other stuff. According to Donald Entringer, who owned Mackenzie's Bakery, he told me he switched to those babies, which were really New Year's Day babies. If you think about it, New Year baby, Jesus baby, but if you think about it, what it looks like, he said a Jewish merchant came to town, I don't know the year, and had thousands of these things he was trying to unload. And Mr. Entringer said, people have been chipping their teeth on my porcelain dolls, and they cost a lot. I'm going to put these in the king cake instead, and did. And everybody made them into baby Jesus. Now, it can be whatever you want it to be. The bean could have represented Jack and the Beanstalk. I don't know. But I firmly believe that's not what it represents, because historically that wasn't what was in there. We did a story for the Mardi Gras Guide this year on Mardi Gras 50 years ago, 1957. Went through every newspaper during the carnival season and found very few ads for bakeries. The biggest ads were Mackenzie's and Binder's Bakery. Not one mention of king cakes. Now, I remember we had king cakes in the 50s. It was a real big deal. I went to John Dybert Elementary. Once a week, we'd have a king cake party. But they were not a big deal. Now, of course, there are millions of them sold. Haydell's Bakery ships 25,000 out of town UPS. One little bakery, so it's a big business. And they include one of my magazines in each king cake package. So I'm really glad it's a big business, and I don't care who they think the dog can be me, I don't care. Just buy those magazines.
I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, sure, I'm okay. Where are we?
Remember when the mules pulled the garbage wagon, and then after that, they put them full of the float?
That's right. We're talking about before we had motorized tractors pulling the floats, they were actually pulled by mules. And the mules would pull the sanitation department wagons during the day and then the floats at night. And there's some famous stories about the mules just sitting down in the middle of a parade route and they actually would not get up. You know, you could beat them, it didn't matter. And they'd sent a police car over to the garbage truck driver's house, bring him over there, and he'd look at the mule and say, Irma, get up. And Irma would get up and pull him forward. I'm serious. It's, you know. Go back there.
Any more questions? One more question.
It's over here. I
Yes,
think.
ma'am.
That the Clydesdales originally pulled the floats. There was someone in central Louisiana that raised them, and they were the first before the mules that pulled the float.
No, that's not true. No, we had mules from 1857 to 1951. The Clydesdales are a wonderful addition to Mardi Gras. They come just about every year, and those are some absolutely beautiful. I actually got to sit on one. They're about 12 feet tall. You can't believe how tall those things are. And it, you know, luckily it just stood there, but I was scared to death.
All right, well, we're going to give Mr. Hardy the chance to pick for the door pliers.
All right.
So it's that time of night.
And I can be bought, so if you need... Okay, it looks like Margaret Chapman.
Oh, yes. So Mr. Hardy's going to be around for about 10, 15 minutes
sure.
to answer any questions. We wanted to announce right before we left that next history lecture series, Miss Christina Vela is going to be here. It's a wonderful author, and the topic is famous Louisiana writers. And that'll be happening on the first Monday of March. So please join us for that. And let's give Mr. Hardy a big round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. You've been great.